When it comes to Japanese brands you must know, there have been 1,001 lists out there. I'm sure you've seen them. And each one of them mentions a lot of the same brands that you probably already know. You got your Bapes, you got your Mastermind, perhaps Neighborhood, and of course, Capital, right? But let's be honest, these brands have been mentioned so much that you must know them by now. Like, you know. So how about an updated list? One that covers the next generation of brands that will likely be the ones to represent Japan for the foreseeable future. How about that? So, as a general rule, all the ones I'm going to present to you today are labels created post-2010, well out of the jurisdiction of the classic Urahara brands that you know about. As another caveat, we're going strictly street today, and we'll move on to the designer/luxury stuff at a later date. You know, I got you. But for now, we're going street. I'm Reggie Casual. Let's get it. All right, so we're gonna start with an easy one, and one that you probably know. While Human Made certainly isn't new, it has about 12 years under its belt, it has more recently come into its own in a major way. Formerly a smaller project after leaving Bape entirely, Nigo's Human Made has since turned into the de facto street brand from Japan that is internationally recognized. Seriously, it got him the job at Kenzo. That's basically what Kenzo is, upscale Human Made. It is what it is. But beyond its growth, Human Made is an amalgamation of street, classic Americana, and Japanese perspective. In turn, it gives us a ton of high quality garments, some great graphic design prints, and an incredibly approachable and appealing, mind you, style and design. Somehow, Nigo managed to turn a classic look into something special, and each collection offers up something that's just unexpectedly appealing. Outside of the fact that the tees are quite possibly the best constructed tees on the planet developed by the world famous Warehouse Co., Human Made has teamed up with several brands for collabs and special releases that solidify its position as yet another successful street brand from Nigo out of Japan. It does come with one caveat though, that Japan sizing can get in the way of it being readily available for everyone. But if you can fit in it and size up to it or size down to it, it's certainly worth it. And as a result, it sits at the top of a new generation of street brands and is likely the most well-known and coveted for those outside of Japan. Like, I didn't even need to tell you this one. You knew this one. Hopefully. All right, so next up, if you're a fan of classic streetwear, you know, t-shirts, hoodies, and the like, the black eye patch is about as classic as it gets. Starting off as simply a sticker brand in 2013, the black eye patch aligns itself mostly with hip hop and skate and started its first full collection in 2015. By 2017, it was appearing at Tokyo Fashion Week in its own little booth, and in 2023, it opened up its own brick and mortar inside where else but Harajuku's Urahara district. And it's purely Japanese in the sense that it doesn't necessarily try to appeal to a more international audience like street brands in Japan's illustrious past. You know which one I'm talking about. Despite being hip hop and skate centered, it maintains that identity from the Japanese perspective, teaming with the likes of A-Witch and other hip hop artists out of Japan. But that doesn't mean you should sleep. It's a pure streetwear brand and stands by its roots hard. Like hard. No diddy. You'll see frequent logo shirts and high profile collabs, but that's not necessarily a bad thing in this case. It's certainly a street brand for a new generation, but it's also on the come up and has some high quality garments to boot. And now it's just in that next tier. It is a staple here. Gotta check it out. Anyway, next up. God Selection X harkens back to a time when street brands made a mockery of fame and wealth, as it frequently features famous photos of individuals and then Xing them out with its trade graphic. Starting in 2013 as a graphic brand, admittedly God Selection X does very little new things, but it reminds you of a time when street was actually street. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Basically the street culture that took chances with what was available and spat in the face of conformity. But don't let that spirit into fooling you that it's just simple graphics with God Selection X. In pure Japanese form, it will surprise you with a piece that could wow you with its take and execution, of course. And quite often you'll just want it because it sounds cool as a brand, or it's simply hard to get past those X's even though you've seen it 1,000 times before. Primarily using black and white, the brand could remind you of early Bounty Hunter or a more committed black scale if it were. That's right, that was for you, dog. You and your friends. You know who I'm talking to. Anyway, it'll probably remain in Japan, that is God Selection X, for the foreseeable future, but it's pretty cool nonetheless, and definitely worth a look for its satisfying satirical content and collections. All right, so before we get into the weeds in the next selection on this list, because they get a little designer heavy, a special shout out goes to FR2, which I would be remiss for not mentioning. Yoi Ishikawa's second brand debuted in 2014 and is probably the most well-known new streetwear brand, particularly for those in Asia outside of like human made, right? So it focuses on counterculture and, to put it mildly, sex and sexiness, right? The brand is officially dubbed as a brand for photographers. What kind of photography is certainly up for debate, but the brand does use a crap ton of gravure models to make a case that it's not about landscape and wedding photography. Just saying, it's not about that. You'll see FR2 in plenty of locations scattered across Japan and Asia, and it's beginning to make a push in the US as well. It made huge waves with its Smoking Kills tee and is strictly positioned as a mainstream street brand with massive appeal. While its mainstream position may be unappealing to some, it's certainly one of the most successful street brands of this generation and worth a look, because not mentioning it here is just kind of weird, right? Especially on this list. Or maybe it's just hating if I didn't mention it. Maybe it's a bit of both, but I'm doing it now. So yeah, FR2 is definitely on this list. Anyway, so we did the street classic, right? But now it's time to get a little bit more venturous. For those who wanna play a little bit with their wardrobe, these next few labels are a bit more cut and sew, and they could be considered the next generation of Japanese street brands from a design standpoint and a full-on cultural standpoint. So with that said, let's get it. All right, so we're gonna start with Always Out of Stock, started in 2016 by my good friend King Masa. And it's more than just a ridiculously well-executed brand, it's built on a trust that you're gonna get the best quality pieces met with the precision of Japanese construction. Starting his career as a sneakerhead, King Masa built his name by blogging about sneakers he copped outside of Japan. You see, King Masa lived in Australia for a time, so he speaks fluent English, but his notoriety landed him in the right situations with the right people in Japan, and he built AOOS, Always Out of Stock, with the intent of merging Western sport, sneaker culture, and Americana with Japanese tailoring and traditional elements, which may sound like a crazy gumbo of ridiculousness, but it ends up being so damn good. I mean, I'm usually skeptical about brands made by so-called influencers, bloggers, and the like, mainly because a lot of the time they bank on trends and the moment at the time. But Always Out of Stock is in a league of its own, and it stands out in every way. Its growth from 2016 to now has been exponential, and I'm not just using that word to mean like, oh, it's so good and he's my boy, so I'm gonna, no, it's crazy. And it has a very strong community base in Japan. As far as anyone's concerned, it's the next up and will be hard to ignore. And thing is, Masa isn't playing. He told me personally that he will not compromise the brand by going to mass manufacturing and plans to keep production in Japan, even if it gets bigger. That says a lot about the dedication of the brand itself, as well as King Masa, and it's just a class act in every way. Dude is doing big things, and I can only give my congratulations to homie. So very good by King Masa, very good, Always Out of Stock, but we gotta go on to the next one. All right, so this next one was started by a gentleman by the name of Hiroaki Tsuyasu in 2014, and that is Kidill. And it is quickly becoming one of the standout 90s street-inspired labels out of Japan. The brand was inspired by Tsuyasu's own experiences and inspirations from a more chance-filled era in the 90s, and as such, the brand takes those same chances, embracing improvisation, but under the influence of a classic subcultural motif. Combining the elements of hardcore punk, skate, graffiti, and general counterculture, the brand has become a hit in Japan, winning awards and opening its own flagship only 2 years after releasing its first collection. And the clothes speak for themselves. Filled with references many of you watching likely instantly recognize, it's bold, far-reaching, and downright hard to understand for anyone looking at fashion as more uniform than experimental. But that's the entire point. Kidill's redeeming quality is that it tacitly asks the question, what happened to individuality? What happened to F-conformity? Even if you're trying to do something different, you're still conforming. That's what it's saying. It's crazy. But it is kind of ironic considering the brand is becoming so popular in Japan and entering into a mainstream space at no fault of its own, other than the fact that it has broken the vice grip of linearity in Japanese fashion that has plagued the industry for the last 20 years or so. That's something that you guys may not know about, is that there's a lot of linearity in Japanese fashion, but that is a conversation for another time. Back to Kidill. Whether appealing to you or not, the brand certainly sets itself apart and will be one to keep your eye on as the years go by. All right, so last up, no matter how you slice it, THELIST's long journey from 2012 to now has been chock full of classic piece after classic piece. Problem is, no one, and I mean no one, outside of Japan is really hip to it, but that will likely soon change. Having displayed its wares finally on the runway, THELIST has emerged from being a low-key underground gem to a powerhouse high street label that takes nearly every street feel concept and owns it. Seriously, it's like if you like distressing or normcore or vintage core or DIY elements or punk or graphics or pretty much anything related to the subcultures of street, THELIST is doing it, and doing it in its own way, in a major way. Now, primarily on the wide side silhouette wise, that's a weird sentence, THELIST does a lot to play with raw materials and raw edge components of construction. It can be serious, it can be playful, and it can be downright experimental, but all that belays the point of a brand that is setting a crazy benchmark for this generation's preferred aesthetic of, I just don't give a damn, but make it look on purpose. Beyond that, THELIST's designer Nori has gotten so antsy he debuted his women's line Undecided and aims to be one of the first to actually take a women's wear approach to street on the runway consistently. Like, others have done this, but he wants to do it like all the time. And the results are speaking for themselves. This is the brand right now to know. THELIST, that is. Undecided as well, if you're into that. It's only growing stronger every day, and it's already making huge waves in Japan, entering into stores that are huge. And they're taking the whole collection. I kid you not, once the doors are open fully with this brand, they will certainly be hard to close. And anybody who is just into street fashion or streetwear, that's the brand that I would just say, yo, check THELIST out, like that one. There's another one, but THELIST is the one on this list, so that's the one that we're covering today. I'll tell you the other one later. Anyway, let's close this out. All right, so that's what I got for you in the street category, but let us know which of the brands on this list you'd like to see next for its very own in-depth review, its own episode, if you will. Basically what that means is we'll pick up some pieces, create some looks, and give you more insight into how it all comes together. State it in the comments or check out a poll and cast a vote that we might put up on our community page. Or simply let us know another label you'd like to see right here on The Casual. You can do that. You can do that. But at the very least, like, sub, turn on notifications if you found this info valuable to you, or you just like this kind of stuff. You like Japanese fashion, you like seeing stuff in Japan. Yeah, just, be a part of the family, community. But most importantly, keep it locked right here for all of your info on international fashion culture and business from Tokyo. It's your boy, and keep it casual. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu. And I will see you guys in a minute.